Ooh, bulge bracket, huh? As a means of introduction, bulge bracket banks are the cream of the crop, the big boys of the finance industry. The JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, the BAMLs, Morgan Stanley. The ones that you've heard of, the banks that even non-finance people know about. The cool, awesome, I go here, I have a big, swinging bank account type of banks. These are kind of like the fangs of your tech world. The Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, Google. This is the cool boys. This is where everyone aspires to go. In this video, and as a means of background for those that have not been following me for too long, I am not part of a bulge bracket bank. I am part of a middle market, a non-bulge bracket bank. But these are my insights based on what I've heard from friends in bulge brackets and comparing it to my experience. A couple topics, a couple discussion points on how they differ, the pros and cons of going into one and not going into one, and just my thoughts in general. I joked about it a little bit in the intro when I went, ooh. But name value. Name value definitely matters. And I think, especially on your resume, if you have JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, it definitely means something. This is not unwarranted. This is not just for flair, but it clearly means you went through the competition, you went through the thousands of applications, and there was something about you that got you to this bulge bracket, this high quality, very selective bank. I think that's a very significant thing, especially in the finance world. I'll touch on this later when I talk about exit opportunities. But name value definitely matters. It also helps that whenever you tell someone, hey, I work for blank, people are going to be like, whoa, you work for blank? That's crazy. How long is that going to last? I don't know. And how many individuals around you are finance world obsessed people that actually understand what it means to go to a bulge bracket bank? I also don't know. I will say, through my networking in non-banking, non-finance industries, I have heard that different worlds, different avenues of life and careers that do exist beyond banking don't necessarily care that much about the brand name of banks. They care that you might have an investment banking experience. They might care that you have these skill sets from investment banks. But if you're outside of the banking world, it's not like people are saying, oh, you're a bulge bracket, you're not a bulge bracket, therefore you suck. They might not even know the distinction between bulge bracket and not. Frankly, I didn't even know that distinction until I joined finance. I'm sure many of you can attest. But overall, if you remain in the finance world, if you like finance, if you like getting a stroke of confidence by having a brand name on your resume, I think that's something to consider. As always, these points are in no particular order of significance, just the way that my stream of consciousness, my thoughts are going. Second, I think training. If you care about how much you get trained in the industry, how much you learn on the job, especially in the front end, I would argue that these big companies, these huge bulge bracket banks probably have a more formalized system of education where they have their own internal training program, internal training modules, and they train you pretty extensively so you can meet the standards that they're looking for and get it going. It's probably more standardized and formulated, whereas boutiques and smaller banks probably have more learn-on-the-job-esque training programs and less formalized education pieces, and a lot that you can build as you go. As you might all be aware from your education systems and your philosophies on education itself, I think there's pros and cons from having a very structured, formalized system versus a learn-on-the-job-as-you-go kind of thing. I will say as a disclaimer, in this job and in any job, you're going to learn on the job anyways. I don't think there's a pro or con to either one. It also fits the type of job you're doing. At a bigger bulge bracket bank, you're going to have to be more routine and formalized. I'm starting to think, is formalized a word? Maybe not. Bottom line, bigger, obviously need more structure. Smaller, probably less structure. Deal size. Size does matter if you think it matters. If you work for a bigger bank, you're going to be on bigger deals. One catch here is there are elite boutiques, these really superior high-level firms like Evercore that do big-ass deals. They're not considered bulge bracket banks because they're not big itself in nature. Whereas the banks like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, they do the big deals that you've heard about, the mergers and the acquisitions that the general public actually hears about, not the finance industry expert only news that only they care about. So if you care about deal size, if you care about having on your resume completed $4 billion of transactions as opposed to 300 million, that's another thing that you should consider. And obviously, as you hope to be part of the finance industry for long, it's probably a lot cooler to say I was part of the Apple blank acquisition rather than the Brian's salt and pepper factory down the street acquisition. So if you care about that kind of stuff, bulge bracket, definitely for you. If you don't, consider other options. I touched on this a little bit about the training component, but a lot of your outputs, a lot of what you're doing internally is going to be very structured at bulge bracket banks. They don't have time to recreate the wheel every single time. I think smaller banks are more used to creating custom decks and providing one-on-one level detail to their clients because they're smaller. They want to provide that home family-esque feeling to their clients. That's what they're about. Whereas bulge bracket banks really need to crank out these decks, distribute them to all their clients, have a formula to what they're doing. I would argue from what I've heard, there is no over customization of slides. It's more of a plug and chug system, so less frustration with customization and aligning of logos. I'm sure which you still have to do, but I think there's less recreating for every single client, which you do see a lot of at smaller boutiques. This also probably goes hand in hand with the idea that bulge brackets probably have a ton of resources compared to boutiques. So they have more things at their disposal that they can use instead of digging deep hard into desktop research. They probably have their own proprietary information database that they have access to, which definitely comes with its ease of accessibility. So those are also things that you should consider. Now for the only thing that people actually care about, compensation. I have heard very mixed things from all across the board, and obviously COVID messed everything up anyways, but I think the way that I see it is with bulge brackets and more public companies, bigger companies, compensation is probably more structured and routine and consistent. Whereas with boutiques, it depends on where bank you're at, what area you're at. But if anything, I've heard that you might be paid more at boutique banks than bigger bulge bracket banks, probably because they're sharing a bigger pie, but with more people, and they're sharing a smaller pie, but with less people. So it's probably very variant on the year, how well that they're doing that year, how their compensation is structured in general. Whereas bigger banks are probably more consistent and there's less variability unless there's a pandemic outside. And even then, it's probably not as up and down as the boutiques are. One aspect that might not matter if you are someone that's born in an area, grew up in an area, plan to be in that area forever, and doesn't matter what location you're at, but bigger bulge bracket banks, just bigger banks in general, probably have a lot more optionality, not only in terms of product and service offering that you might be able to switch from one to another to, but geography. Let's say you're in the New York office and you're interested in being in LA, then there's probably an easier way of transition between those offices because there's so many employees, so many locations, and you moving from one to another probably isn't going to make that much of a dent. So if you have a strong preference and there's an opening, there's probably no reason not to move you. Whereas if you're in a boutique bank, one, there might not be a location at the location you're looking for, and two, you are a bigger portion of the pie, so you moving might be significant. There might not be various openings at various locations, so it probably is harder to move around as compared to bigger banks. And lastly, I touched on this on various points prior, but exit ops. Quite logically, if you are at a bulge bracket or a bigger bank, there's going to be bigger private equity firms, bigger finance leaders that are going to want you for your name brand, but also because the pipeline just works that way. There's going to be a lot of UPenn Wharton kids who went to Goldman Sachs who now work at KKR, and they're going to keep pulling you up because you have the same credentials, they know the experience you've been through, and if you're at a boutique, it's probably going to be very hard, if not outright impossible, for you to break into these elite, huge, big private equity firms, hedge funds, so on and so forth. If that matters to you and your ultimate goal, you're set in stone in going to the KKRs, the TPGs of the world, you're going to want to start at a bulge bracket bank and not limit yourself. Whereas if that doesn't matter to you and what you care about is your personal experience and perhaps the culture of the boutique that you're looking at, then there's no reason to overly stress yourself out into getting into a bulge bracket, because even boutiques and bigger boutiques will open gateways to all the finance options you can get into. It's just the big boys that probably have a higher barrier to entry, as you might expect, and they want you to have that bulge bracket experience. Thanks everyone for watching. Apologies on the short video that just had me spew things about things I might not even be an expert in, because as I said again, I don't have bulge bracket experience, but it's been a crazy week. Just wanted to get something out to you guys. Thanks for 7.5 thousand subscribers. Rapid growth. Growth is good. I appreciate it always. It's getting a little cold in Chicago. I might head home in a bit to California to spend the winter and take full advantage of this work from home setting. Hope everyone is staying safe out there. Have a great week and see you guys next week. Let's go.